everyone assumes the boss won't be back for hours, Adrian Ward, billionaire tech investor, stepped through the front door 2 hours earlier than planned, rolling his suitcase quietly across the marble floor. He expected to hear music, maybe laughter, maybe his wife, Lillian, rehearsing for her charity gala. Instead, he heard his mother's voice. Dorothy Bennett, 72. Black. Gentle. The woman who raised him when he had nothing. Her voice trembled, strained, breathy, coming from the kitchen. Adrian's steps slowed. Then he heard Lillian. "Didn't I tell you to move faster?" she snapped. "If you can't keep up, maybe you shouldn't be living here rent-free." There was a crack. The sound of glass hitting tile. Dorothy gasped. I'm sorry, ma'am. My hands, my arthritis." "Oh, please," Lillian scoffed. "Save the act. Clean it up before Adrian comes home. He doesn't need to see how useless you are." Adrian froze mid-breath. His wife's voice struck again. Sharper now. "And don't look at me like that. You're not his real mother. You're the help. Act like it." A pulse roared in Adrian's ears, because in that instant, he realized two things. His wife had a side he'd never met, and his mother had been protecting him from it. This is Black Stories, where the pain of prejudice is told, and justice always finds its voice. If you believe real love is measured in protection, not pedigree, tap like and subscribe. Because in the next minutes, you'll watch a billionaire freeze as the woman who raised him is humiliated, and then watch that same quiet mother rise as truth cracks a mansion built on appearances and shatters the wife who thought kindness made Dorothy small. Dorothy Bennett wasn't fragile. People assumed she was because her hair had gone silver and her steps had slowed, but age never erased the steel in her spine. She was the woman who raised Adrian Ward when life tried to break him. After his parents died in a car accident when he was 9, it was Dorothy, his neighbor, then his guardian, then the only constant he had left, who kept food on the table, kept the lights on, and kept hope alive. When the state tried to place him in the system, Dorothy signed the papers without hesitation. She didn't have much, but she had enough to look the social worker in the eye and say, "He's mine now." She worked nights at the hospital laundry, mornings in a school cafeteria, and somehow still found the breath to tuck Adrian in, whispering, "You're going to build something beautiful one day. I just know it." She never once asked him for anything. So when Adrian made his first million, then his first billion, he bought her a home inside his mansion because he wanted her close. Safe. Comfortable. Loved. He didn't know the walls he built to protect her had slowly become the cage Lillian used to control her. At first, it was subtle. Meals arriving cold, the staff suddenly too busy to help her downstairs. Her favorite teacup mysteriously disappearing after she broke too many dishes. The wheelchair remote that would vanish for hours at a time, conveniently freeing itself whenever Adrian returned home. Lillian always had explanations. "Oh, Dorothy misplaces things. She prefers to eat later. She must be confused." Confused. That was the word Lillian loved because it made Dorothy sound weak. But Dorothy was not weak. She saw everything. She noticed the way staff only greeted her when Lillian wasn't around. She noticed the visitors, old church friends, who arrived at the gate only to be turned away by security with the same line. "Mrs. Ward isn't accepting guests today." She noticed her phone mysteriously failing for weeks at a time, only to repair itself after Adrian returned. She noticed the isolation, calculated, intentional, silent, and she endured it. Not because she was powerless, but because she didn't want to burden the son she loved more than her own breath. Whenever Adrian asked if she was all right, She smiled, that soft, familiar smile. "I'm fine, baby. Just tired." But when her door closed at night, she would lift her phone and record voice memos in a whisper. Day 12, meals missed again. Wheelchair remote gone all afternoon, couldn't leave my room. Lillian raised her voice today, called me dead weight. Treated like a nuisance. It's getting worse. I'll send everything to the lawyer if anything happens. She never pressed send. She waited. Weeks later, when the whispers in the house turned into outright threats, she did something else. She asked the one person she still trusted on staff, the night security tech, to help her pull copies of any footage with her in it. "Just in case," she'd whispered. He didn't ask questions. He just handed her a tiny silver USB drive the next day and said, "Keep this somewhere safe." Because her late husband once told her, the night before he passed. Truth is patient, baby, but it never loses. And tonight, when Adrian walked into that kitchen and heard the voice he trusted more than life tremble under cruelty, truth finally stood up. Adrian Ward had always believed his home was peaceful. Quiet halls, professional staff, orderly routines. But as he walked through the mansion after hearing Lillian's sharp voice echo across the marble floors, he saw everything differently. Saw what Dorothy had been living with. The hierarchy was no longer invisible. It was a living thing. Staff froze the second Lillian appeared at the end of a hallway. Shoulders tight, conversation dying mid-sentence. No one breathed wrong in her presence. No one dared. Workers of color stayed pressed against the walls, eyes lowered, hands clasped behind them like they had been trained to minimize their existence. White staff, however, moved freely, entering rooms others were barred from, speaking comfortably, even laughing. One passed Adrian and said, "Good afternoon, sir." A Latina housekeeper walking behind him received nothing but a stiff glance. It struck Adrian like a blow. He had hired all these people. Yet somehow Lillian had trained the house into a caste system he never noticed. The estate employed over 40 staff, chefs, gardeners, housekeepers, drivers, with its own private HR contractor that handled schedules, payroll, and complaints. He entered the dining corridor and overheard something that twisted his stomach. Lillian, chatting brightly with guests hours earlier, had said, "Oh, Dorothy's sweet, but her attitude is slipping. Age, I guess." Attitude. A word used to shrink someone who had raised him with kindness and sacrifice. He moved toward Dorothy's wing of the mansion, and for the first time, he realized how far it truly was. Across 2 hallways, down a secluded corridor, tucked behind a set of double doors. Lillian had insisted on this layout when they renovated. "Dorothy needs quiet," she'd said. But now he understood the real reason. Isolation. Dorothy's room was so far from the central living spaces that she could scream, and no one would hear. The distance felt strategic, cruel, chosen. When he reached the east hallway, he noticed cameras, small, newer models he didn't approve. He frowned. He'd never signed off on those installations. Their angles were unusually specific. Facing Dorothy's door, facing the elevator she used, facing the corridor leading to the kitchen. Someone had been watching. He just didn't know who had access, or what they'd already seen. He checked the panel. Lillian's access code. Then he remembered his schedule. Trips, conferences, charity events, weeks away at a time. Every time he was gone, Lillian kept the mansion exactly as she wanted it. And HR. He had called to inquire last month when a staff member resigned suddenly. HR responded with a breezy, "Just personality differences, sir." Now he knew the truth. He overheard 2 housekeepers whispering, "3 people complained. HR lost every report." Lost? Girl, HR never loses anything. Lillian made sure. The hypocrisy stung hardest when he noticed a framed photo on the wall, a glossy poster from Lillian's most recent philanthropy gala. Respecting Elders in Modern America, featuring keynote speaker Lillian Ward. Respecting Elders, hung on a wall in the same house where she starved Dorothy of kindness. Adrian stood in the hallway, the entire mansion's rot exposed around him. Dorothy had carried this alone, but today he heard her cry out. And nothing would ever be the same. Dorothy's hands were shaking as Adrian rounded the corner, glass glinting across the hardwood like scattered ice. Her wheelchair was parked inches from the mess where she'd been leaning over, picking up shards with bare fingers. She tried to hide her palms behind her lap blanket, but the small cuts were already bleeding. "Dorothy?" Adrian whispered again. Lillian spun so fast her heel screeched against the floor. The shock on her face lasted one heartbeat. Then her expression melted into a practiced, trembling concern. "Oh, honey!" she rushed out, breathy, overacting. "She slipped. The poor thing. She dropped the vase and panicked. I was just helping her get cleaned up." Dorothy didn't lift her gaze. Adrian didn't move. He looked from Dorothy to the broken vase, to the broom leaning untouched against the wall, then back at Lillian's too wide smile. "Helping her," he repeated softly. Lillian stepped toward him, reaching for his arm. "Sweetheart, you're home early. I didn't expect—" He stepped back. Her hand hung in the air like an accusation. A beat of silence, a shift in the house. Staff who had pretended to dust shelves just moments earlier stood motionless, eyes darting between their employers, knowing danger when they saw it. Adrian's voice was low, steady, dangerous. Why was she cleaning broken glass? With her hands? Lillian froze. Her throat bobbed. I told you, she panicked. She grabbed it before I could stop her." Dorothy's lip trembled. "I'm fine." "No," Adrian said sharply, turning his attention to her. "You don't have to cover this." Lillian's smile cracked. "Cover what? Adrian, this is absurd." He lifted one of Dorothy's hands gently. Tiny cuts. Blood beading. Lillian flinched. "Explain this," he said. Lillian's voice snapped like a whip. "Because she never listens. I tell her to rest. She refuses. She has been impossible lately. You have no idea what I've dealt with while you're gone." Her words sliced through the quiet like a blade. The cook at the far end of the hall stiffened. The housekeeper paused mid-step. A gardener froze near the doorway, broom in hand. Dorothy's breath hitched. She whispered, "I'm sorry, Mrs. Ward." "Don't apologize," Adrian said, eyes still locked on Lillian. "What exactly have you dealt with, Lillian?" The temperature in the room dropped. Lillian blinked, slowly, as if she didn't understand the words. Then her lips curved in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm telling you the truth," she insisted. "She forgets things. She argues. She wanders. You know how elders get—" Dorothy flinched as if struck. Adrian straightened inches taller. "Don't talk about her like she's a burden." Lillian's face twisted before she could stop it, rage surfacing through the cracks of her performance. "So now I'm the villain?" she hissed. "Because I actually run this house while you fly around pretending to care about business? You think she's perfect? Try babysitting her for months." Gasps fluttered from the staff. Dorothy shut her eyes. And for the first time, Adrian saw it. The truth she had been hiding behind every forced smile. Lillian realized the same moment he did. Her control was slipping, and it terrified her. The hallway felt too small, too quiet. Even the air stopped moving. Lillian stood rigid, breath sharp, eyes darting between Adrian and Dorothy, calculating her next lie, her next performance, her next escape. But Dorothy had stopped shrinking. Her trembling hand slipped into the pocket of her cardigan. Slowly, purposefully. Adrian. Her voice was soft enough to fade, but it carried like thunder. I need to show you something. She pulled out a small silver USB drive. It looked harmless, light, ordinary. But Lillian reacted as if Dorothy had drawn a weapon. Color drained from her face. Her jaw dropped. She lurched forward before she could control herself. Dorothy, don't... Dorothy closed her fist around the USB, and Lillian froze. The staff didn't move. Not a blink. Not a breath. Adrian's eyes locked on the tiny device. What is that? Dorothy swallowed, shoulders trembling. Not from fear this time, but from the weight of finally telling the truth. Baby, I didn't want to ruin your marriage. Her voice cracked, years of silence breaking open. I kept hoping things would get better, that she'd find kindness somewhere in herself. Lillian snapped. She's lying. Adrian, she's old. She's confused. Dorothy lifted her chin. I'm not confused. Her tone had changed. It carried history, memory, pain, and a strength that had been bruised, but never broken. Adrian flinched. She held out the USB. Her hand shook, but her gaze did not. This, she whispered, is everything that's been happening when you're gone. The way she talks to me, the way she treats me, all of it. Silence detonated. Not a fragile silence, a heavy one. A courtroom silence. A silence that knew someone had finally been caught. Adrian's world tilted. His stomach dropped. His fingers hovered inches from the USB, as if holding it might collapse everything he believed about his home, his wife, his marriage, himself. Everything? He whispered. Dorothy nodded once. You deserve the truth, she said. All of it. Lillian let out a desperate laugh. Too loud, too sharp. She's manipulating you. She planned this. Adrian, look at her. She's vindictive. Dorothy cut in, not with anger, but with utter clarity. I recorded your words, Lillian. The staff gasped. Lillian went white as marble. And for the first time since Dorothy entered this house, she wasn't the one trembling. The media room doors closed with a soft click, but the sound felt final, like the ceiling of a courtroom. Dorothy sat near the front, hands folded tightly in her lap. Adrian stood beside her, jaw clenched, chest rising and falling like someone fighting off an earthquake. Lillian lingered near the back, arms crossed, eyes darting for exits that didn't exist. Adrian inserted the USB into the large wall screen. The first video loaded instantly. A timestamp appeared. Then, clip number 1, dinner table. Lillian's voice echoed through the speakers, cold and sharp. Dorothy, you don't need seconds. You barely move. Don't make yourself heavier for people who have to push you. On screen, she yanked Dorothy's plate away. Dorothy's tiny, embarrassed flinch filled the entire room. A staff member in the back covered her mouth. Lillian blurted, That's taken out of context. Adrian hit play. Clip number 2. Hallway. Dorothy sat in her wheelchair. Lillian stood above her, arms crossed, expression dripping cruelty. You'd still be in that rundown apartment if not for me, Lillian hissed. So stop acting like you deserve anything here. Someone whispered, Oh my God. Dorothy blinked rapidly, but said nothing. The clip ended. Adrian swallowed hard. Loud, painful. Clip number 3. Living room. Dorothy reached for a glass of water. Lillian snatched her wrist mid-air. Wait your turn. I didn't call you. Dorothy winced. A soft whimper leaked through those speakers. A male housekeeper shook his head. tears glossing his eyes. Lillian stepped forward, voice trembling with panic. "That looks worse than it was. She was being stubborn, Adrian lifted one hand. She went silent. Clip number 4. Kitchen door. Dorothy sat alone, staring at her phone. Her voice, shaky, exhausted. Please, I just want to call my son." Lillian's hand shot into frame. Slap. The phone flew across the floor. Dorothy recoiled like a child being hit. Everyone in the room gasped. Adrian's entire world collapsed in on itself. His fists tightened, knuckles whitened. His shoulders trembled with a rage so deep it frightened even the people watching. He paused the video. Silence. The kind that made your ears ring. The kind that told you something irreversible had happened. Adrian turned slowly toward his wife. For the first time since the day they met, there was nothing soft in his gaze. No affection, no hesitation, no disbelief. Just devastation and something colder than anger, something that promised consequences. "Lillian," he said, voice steady but stripped bare, "you laid hands on my mother, in my house." His voice cracked on the last word. Dorothy looked down at her lap, tears slipping free. Lillian stammered. "Adrian, I can explain." He stepped back, as if the sound of her voice physically repelled him. "No," he whispered. "You can't." Something inside him, something he thought was unshakable, finally broke, and everyone in the room felt the fracture. For years, Adrian thought the mansion was silent because it was peaceful. Tonight he learned it had been silent because everyone inside was afraid. When the last video clip ended, no one moved. The room felt suspended, like the whole house was holding its breath. Then the butler, who had served the Ward estate for 27 years, took one hesitant step forward. His voice wavered. "Sir, Mrs. Bennet often didn't receive her meals. Mrs. Lillian instructed the kitchen to delay them until your mother went to bed hungry." A ripple went through the staff. Adrian's brows pulled tight, a quiet horror settling in. The chef, normally cheerful, looked ashamed. "She demanded I plate her food cold, said, 'She's old, she won't taste the difference.' I didn't agree, sir, but she threatened to have me deported." Lillian snapped. "That is a lie?" But the housekeeper stepped up, voice trembling with remembered fear. "She locked Miss Dorothy on the balcony one night, on purpose. Said she needed fresh air but took away the remote to her wheelchair. She stayed out there for hours." Dorothy lowered her head, shoulders folding, humiliation resurfacing. Adrian pressed a hand to his mouth, eyes shining. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" the housekeeper whispered. "We tried, sir. HR said to stay quiet if we wanted to keep our jobs." Lillian whirled on her. "You people exaggerate everything." Before she could continue, the driver spoke, an older man who'd been with the family since Adrian's college days. "Sir, she shredded letters Dorothy wrote to you, birthday cards, notes, even medical updates," Dorothy murmured. "I thought you were too busy to write back." Adrian's face twisted. Grief first, then something darker. Lillian stumbled backward, hands raised. "You're all being manipulated. She's playing the victim. She's always been dramatic." "No," a soft voice cut in. Everyone turned. It was the Chinese nanny, the quiet woman who had rarely spoken more than necessary since they hired her. Her eyes were steady, her voice calm, her words lethal. "She told me black women exaggerate pain, that Miss Dorothy was acting when she asked to go to the hospital." The room froze so hard the air itself felt sharp. Dorothy closed her eyes. A tear slipped down her cheek. Adrian's breath left him in one shudder. He covered his mouth again, as if the truth physically hurt. Lillian's face drained. That's taken out of context. But no one was listening anymore. The staff stepped closer to Dorothy, instinctively forming a quiet shield around her. She looked up at Adrian, voice soft but filled with years of swallowed strength. "I stayed," she whispered, "because I knew you wouldn't see it, until it stood right in front of you. And now it has." Her eyes glistened as she held his gaze. No more hiding. The weight of that truth crushed through the room, leaving no escape, no excuses, no more shadows to hide in. Security didn't drag Lillian out. They didn't need to. The moment the staff stepped away from Dorothy and Adrian turned toward her, silent, expression carved from something she had never seen before. Lillian's bravado cracked like thin porcelain. "Pack your things," Adrian said quietly. "No shouting, no theatrics, just finality." Lillian's breath hitched. "Adrian, wait! We can talk about—" "No," he said, voice low but immovable. "You talked. Mother suffered." Security flanked her gently, giving her dignity she had never given Dorothy. As they walked her out, she kept turning back, pleading, bargaining, panicking. None of it worked. The staff she had terrorized for years looked on, not with vengeance, but with relief. That night, Adrian drafted the legal separation papers himself. By morning, the news had spread. CEO's wife removed from estate amid allegations of elder mistreatment. Investigators arrived. Staff gave testimony after testimony. Old HR records surfaced, intentionally buried complaints, altered schedules, deleted messages. But none of those moments matched the weight of what happened just after sunrise. Dorothy Bennett woke in the same small guest room Lillian had banished her to. She was adjusting her cardigan when Adrian walked in, soft smile trembling with emotion. "Come with me," he said. She followed him down the hallway she'd once been told never to enter. Past portraits she had dusted but never been allowed to stand beneath. Past the grand staircase she used to avoid so she wouldn't get in the way. He opened the door to the master family suite, the largest room in the entire mansion. The room Dorothy never imagined stepping into, let alone living in. Adrian turned to her. "Mom, this house is yours. It always should have been." Dorothy froze. The words hit deeper than any blow she had endured. Her lips trembled. "Baby, I don't need all this." "I know," he whispered, "but you deserve it." In the weeks that followed, attorneys, auditors, and architects moved through the estate like a quiet storm. Policies changed, staff contracts were rewritten, and Adrian kept one promise burning at the center of it all. When he unveiled the final change, she truly broke. The Ward Family Charitable Foundation, one of the largest in the region, had a new name freshly engraved in gold: the Dorothy Bennett Institute for Elder Dignity. Programs listed beneath: combat elder neglect nationwide, provide housing grants for vulnerable seniors, train caregivers with compassion, not power, fund legal support for abused elders. Dorothy pressed a shaking hand over her mouth. These weren't just honors. They were corrections. They were justice. And for the first time in years, Dorothy Bennett cried tears not of fear, but of triumph. By the time the new plaque was mounted in the downstairs hall, the mansion felt different. Not quieter, lighter. Dorothy rolled through the hallways she once feared entering, sunlight spilling across her lap. Staff paused as she passed, smiling with something deeper than respect. Relief, freedom, gratitude. Adrian walked beside her, no longer the distracted billionaire trying to balance a collapsing marriage, but a son finally seeing clearly. A son reclaiming the woman who had saved his life long before he ever made his first dollar. Downstairs, the gold plaque gleamed. The Dorothy Bennett Institute for Elder Dignity. Dorothy touched the engraving with trembling fingers. "It's too much," she whispered. "It's the minimum," Adrian said. And for the first time since she entered that mansion, Dorothy believed it. They called her a burden. They treated her like furniture. They silenced her because she was black, and because she was kind. But when truth stood up, lies had nowhere left to hide. Dorothy looked out at the staff gathered around her, smiling through tears. "Respect," she said softly, "is the real inheritance." Because sometimes truth is patient, but it never loses. This is Black Stories, where the ignored are finally heard, dignity rises, and justice rewrites the ending. If you believe elders deserve